Hello, everybody. Am I coming through the microphone? Yes, I am. So, my name is Kenta Barrett. I am a solutions engineer at OneTrust. I specialize in all of our consent tooling. So, my background is all in technology, typically front-end technology rather than data. So, I'm a little bit closer to the marketing side than the data side. But what I'm here to talk about today is driving personalization at scale through consent, which is the connection point between marketing and data. How can we utilize that data? So I'm going to be covering these three topics plus some kind of key takeaways and questions and answers. Why consent matters, how we can utilize consent from a omni-channel perspective, and then finally, what are the key benefits? How do we activate this customer 360 profile is what we call it, that consent from beginning to end. So why consent matters fundamentally is data, right? Companies thrive off of data. The key point, and OneTrust is at core a privacy data governance company, are we using it responsibly? From a customer perspective, so McKinsey did a report on this, 2/3, so 67% of users don't know or don't trust how companies are utilizing their data. So you've got 33% yes, but this is down from before. It used to be about 50, around kind of give or take 50-50 whether they trust you or not. That's down to 33, trust us or not, right? How are we utilizing this data? And this shift has kind of happened over many years. We've had GDPR, we've had lots of different tech changes as many years on now, but we've kind of got these three main areas around the responsible use of data. Why are we having these changes? You probably all know this, but modern privacy laws, 75% of the world is kind of covered now by a modern privacy law, which, how do we utilize data? Shifting the ownership of that data from the company who captures it to the individual. It is my data, which you are utilizing. The second part is, once again, kind of linked together, the tech changes. So third-party cookies are not fully going away anymore. Good news. Problem is, the damage has already been done to a degree. People are changing their consent, they're more aware. The signal fidelity of that data is down. We've lost about 50% by different studies that we've kind of looked at. And then the last point is consumers are expecting more. They want more personalization. They will change the way they purchase based on the experience that they have. So because of the regulations, there's a higher risk, higher cost of non-compliance. Because of technology changes, it's more expensive to access that data now, but customers want more. And typically this is being seen as it's a loss. But the point of this is that there is a key opportunity within that. Primarily, you need more data. Capturing the data yourselves as organizations rather than being beholden to the big data players out there. I've got a few statistics on there around the kind of the different changes in the environment. We've got a proven increase in revenue by engaging with customers, by building consent into your data flows, into your marketing. Various other statistics, you can look at that, but really a great example. My wife once clicked on an article about Simone Biles, right, Olympian level gymnast. And it was an article which is about she got a lot of backlash because she took her safety into account. She felt like they have that dizziness when they're doing somersaults where they don't know where they are. And she made the correct decision to take her safety into account. I'm not performing at my top level, I do need to back out of this. And there was a load of backlash, there was a lot of sexism and racism and all these different conversations around that. Very interesting article. The social media platform boiled it down to she was interested in gymnastics. And now that's the data. She was getting all these articles and videos about gymnastics, and that's not the point of why she clicked on this article. There's a much deeper, much more nuanced, much more interesting conversation happening around this point. They didn't even care about Olympics. It was just gymnastics. That's the base tagline there. The flip side is if you understand your customers directly, you have that interaction. It's a personal, more accurate data. So being able to capture that first-party data, not necessarily beholden to all the different technologies out there, which is at a loss. And this is an opportunity and a competitive edge that a lot of our customers are now choosing to take. So the idea of responsible use of data is key. Data fuels your products and your services, and data fuels your personalization and the customer experience, fundamentally. But when you do that responsibly, you get this data efficiency. You now got clear understanding of where your data is, who controls it, and you've got a load of, obviously, risk and compliance mitigations. But also, you can glean understandings of that data which you couldn't before because you are clear about how it's being protected, who is using it. And that builds brand trust. Virtuous cycle, if you're using data correctly, people feel that their choices matter, they will give you more data. So then you can deliver more value. So then you're using it responsibly, builds more trust, they'll give you more data. It's this continuous cycle of that. So that's why we want data, that's why we want to use data compliantly. And there's a load of different areas around the life cycle of data, where we collect that data, how we process it, share it, use it, store it, dispose of it. There's a lot of tools in place when it comes to security, compliance, different responsibilities that you have. So I'm not going to talk about all of that. Your DPOs, your data architects are very clear, and your security are very clear about all these topics. My main goal today is talking about the consent side of things. Where is the customer choice involved in this? How can they give you the data securely and with their voice as part of that? How can they control who has access to that data? If you're sharing the data, what is the benefit to me? If you're putting it into an AI model, what is the benefit to me as an individual? If I don't see that, I'm not going to give you my data, especially when it comes to AI models. That's the big thing everyone's going to be talking about. It's scary. You can't take personal data out of it once it's been built. If you're non-compliant at the time, tearing down a multi-million-pound project is very painful, both emotionally and probably to people's careers. So having consent built into the capture and usage of that data is incredibly important. So how do we make that privacy promise happen? How do we deliver what actually happens? From a consent perspective, this is the goal, right? So this is what I've been specializing in over the past few years. I've got a few kind of colleagues around, so you can always go speak to us in more detail around the specifics of how OneTrust does it. I do want to genericize this a little bit, take a step back and go consent management as a whole. Because obviously there's loads of different tools. They all do consent management differently. Why do we need to have a specialized omni-channel consent capture model? So the business justification around a unified consent solution is kind of these three things. And I actually kind of want to address them sort of in reverse, and I didn't want to bother changing the animation, so forgive me on that. Firstly, demonstrating that proof is more and more difficult. This is the kind of the boring side of it, but incredibly important. How do you prove that you got consent, when you got it, from whom, was it captured compliantly? That's a difficult question. It's probably the most difficult one for a lot of technologies to answer. If it's just a flag, yes or no, how can you say what consent looked like 3 months ago when you processed that data? Did you delete the data correctly? We've deleted the data, we don't have it anymore. It's like, yeah, but what did you do with it 6 months ago? Can you answer that question? And when it's personal information, that's an important question to answer, and that's what a lot of the enforcement actions are around. How do we prove that? How do we then accurately enforce that across all our different technologies? Each technology has their own method. Often it's just a flag. I'll go into this a bit more detail on the next slide because there's a lot more options, and it's very exciting because I'm a nerd and I like technology. And then finally, this unified view. This kind of is what allows both of these things to happen, the other two things, but it gives you an understanding of all the choices the person has made during that journey, so we can understand and extract more value out of that. So the three main areas from a technical implementation of that is the consent capture, the enforcement, and then the specific views and understandings later on. Right? So this middle part is kind of what I want to come back to in a second. But the first part, consent capture, we've got different collection points. How are those worded? What's that transaction? This is kind of the benefit of it. So you've got an audit of all the different ways we're capturing that data and what specific legal text consent mechanism was utilized there. By making this technology agnostic, it doesn't matter where you're capturing that data, but we've got a standardized consent model. It makes it easier to remain compliant. You understand how it's being captured, and you've got this audit of the collection points, not necessarily even the individual transactions, but how we're capturing that data. So that's the first benefit. That gives you that compliance side around that to make sure you have that. The second part of it, underneath it, is the preference centers. Consent is only valid if someone can freely take it away at any point in time, right? This is the part where I'm going to get a tiny bit off topic, and I'm going to experiment this, where when you think of consent, there's two topics people think about. Everybody here is thinking about marketing and data. We all know what the other topic is, right? Consent is a very important thing, but you can learn from both of those topics. If you're getting consent from somebody for something, they have to be able to change their mind at any point in time. Otherwise, it's a massive invasion of privacy or more. You know what I'm talking about. I can leave it there. We learn those things. That's what a preference center does. It gives you the ability to change your consent at any point. You can say, I don't want that. The real power is to then say how. It's not just yes or no, I don't want that. To say, actually, I do want it, but I don't want it as much. I don't want a newsletter every single day. I'm getting thousands of emails from different products. I want it once a week, maximum. If you think about a shoe website, I'm not into high heels. It's not really my choice, right? Not really a thing for me. My wife also doesn't really wear high heels too much. She's out of practice. She says her feet aren't trained anymore for it. If I want to turn that off, I should be allowed to do that. That's irrelevant ads. So that's what a preference center does. It gives you the ability to have granular control over those choices. And then that becomes a really secure piece of consent, because they didn't say yes or no, they said how. And that's a really powerful statement to any supervisor authority to a customer, saying, this is what you asked for, we gave that to you. It's not just a yes or no, it's an ongoing relationship. So that's that first stage. The second stage is the different technologies that you're going to be implementing with. They are vast. There's different ways we can honor that consent. And typically it's yes or no. It's just an on or off, can I do this specific processing? And that's not normally extractable as a piece of consent. It's just a flag. Really, you want to have the full audit around it. But we've got some really cool use cases nowadays. So if you're using like a modern kind of MDM, large database, something like Snowflake, Databricks, the big data management tools, you can do things like access controls. Change who can access that row of data. We're going to mask it from all of our marketing tools. We're going to mask it from all of our AI tools. But our customer support can still utilize it. Our downstream tools kind of for the customer experience can still utilize it. We can personalize their experience, but we're not going to be mass bombarding them with emails. And from a technology perspective, very cool, very privacy-centric. From a compliance perspective, it's very difficult to see what the choice was, because it's not a flag. There's no data there. It's actually an access control. So to pull that, it's not actually enforced on the row itself. It is in another table somewhere which is managing the access controls. So it becomes more complicated to actually figure out from a compliance perspective to say what their choice is. So this is why we separate out the consent management as a separate tool to be agnostic, to touch all those different points. And for that third point, we've got a full view of what the customer has chosen, what they've done. We've got the full audit and history, and we can do the A/B testing. We can do the management of where are people saying yes, how do they want to be communicated with. The big thing that we did a study on cookie banners, and I'll touch upon this now around kind of this difference between CMP and UCPM. But the difference with cookie banners, we did a study on that where you've got for the 5 main categories: strictly necessary, performance/analytics, functional, targeting, social media. Those are kind of the 5 kind of industry standard categories on a cookie banner. And of the people who say reject all, with a little bit of education about what each of those categories actually mean, 100% of that group turned something on. 100% of the group consented to something. Maybe not everything, maybe don't get the full targeting, but they turned on maybe functional. So they've now got a better experience on the website. Things aren't randomly turned off. Maybe they turned on analytics. There's anonymized data, but you can figure out, understand how the site is working, where the common choices are, so we can improve performance, maybe do some kind of efficiencies on the website. That's something that then delivers value. When they see that that relationship is being honored, they're more likely to then turn on targeting. They're more likely then to turn on the social media for the retargeting. It's a step-by-step process. You don't ask for things in one go. It is this holistic consent and preference choice journey throughout it, and you have different touch points. So in OneTrust, we have two main areas of consent. The CMP, which is the consent management platform. It's a small SDK which goes on a web page or a mobile application to control consent within the device. That's typically anonymized. We can also do it profile-based. UCPM, Unified Consent, it's a lot of the same letters, but focus on the letter U, makes it easier to remember which one's which. That is the full consent experience for any choices, including things like no choice given. We can track the acknowledgement of a privacy policy, what was the legal text that they saw. They didn't have a choice in the matter, they have to say yes, but we're tracking that they said yes, so we know exactly the legal text that they saw. So those are the two main kind of areas within OneTrust, and typically those are managed separately. There's nobody on the market who can do that full journey from the anonymous CMP-based all the way through to the larger universal consent piece. And then these have that cross-pollination ability. So as a user is growing on this journey, maybe they start off anonymous, and maybe they do accept tracking, maybe they don't. Maybe they say, I don't want to be tracked. I've just stepped into your website, don't track me. I was having a conversation with someone the other day who was saying, it's like my shop, my physical shop. I should be able to see how many people come into my shop. And it's like, yeah, but that's your server. Your server is the shop. We're dishing out analytics and understanding the requests coming to our server. If you're tracking them on their device, it's sort of like eyeball tracking. It's sort of like cameras in the shop following Kenta around and seeing how many croissants he buys, slightly too many. But then they start targeting me with croissants. Like, no, this is my shame eating. Please don't target my shame eating. I'm getting a little bit personal, sorry. But later on, once I've maybe signed up to a newsletter, to an account, and they go, would you like us to personalize your experience? Yes or no? We can now turn on tracking later on. These different touch points, each one of these is an opportunity to improve your relationship. You're not supposed to ask for everything War and Peace up front. It's step by step throughout the journey. There's all these different consent points where we're capturing pieces of data, pieces of consent, improving the relationship, making it more granular. It's not just yes or no to emails. It is, yes, I want emails for marketing. I don't want you to send me marketing via text, but I do want big alerts and updates via text. We need the granular control for people to make those choices, and nobody wants to see all of them. People know what they don't want. We don't know what we want, but we know what we don't want. And it's about figuring out what those touch points are to make sure throughout that journey we're engaging with them correctly. So, do I have 10 more minutes because we started 10 minutes late? Is that correct? I just want to double check that. I believe so. I'm going to do that anyway. Who cares? So I saw it said quarter past, but I started 10 minutes late. We're going to keep going. So activating customer 360 profiles. The key to unlocking this, as they make those choices, to understand deeper and deeper what they are. Collecting and unifying consent gives customers a 360 view of behaviors to fuel cross-channel journeys and reveal more data from individuals. We bit by bit. It's not going to be all at once. There's all those, depending on the relationship, and we work with the customer, the end user, what they want to give. A really good example of this, real-life examples, those third-party big tech giants who have lots of data, who are pushing gymnastics on my wife when she has zero interest. She's actually a boxer more than a gymnast. So you have that data yourselves. You know how valuable Kenta Barrett is as a customer to you, more so than the giant social media companies. Rather than them saying, look, this is what they're interested in, you know what they really are interested in because you've got that direct relationship. You can feed that data into your retargeting programs, and for cheaper, capture that user. Capture those targeted ads, not because the social media giant says this person's interested in gymnastics, but because you know Kenta is interested in croissants, right? That's how it's going to work. It allows you to get those valuable customers faster by fueling it with your own first-party data that you have earned from your relationships with the customers. It allows you to activate data in real time. As soon as somebody opts in, you can send them a welcome email, no matter the channel. One of the customers I was speaking with, who are a giant luxury fashion brand in Europe, I'll leave it as generic as that. If you log into their online portal, there's a little piece underneath which says, would you like to sign up for the email, like newsletter? They're separate technologies. So you literally can copy and paste your email from a higher up box into a lower down box. That is such a weird customer experience. It's on the web page. I see my email here. You're asking for my email here. Why can't you just repopulate that for me? Because they've got two separate technologies which can't talk to each other, which makes no sense. So if I want to give my consent to something via the phone over customer support, or via the account page, or via my email address, it should all be feeding to the same places. How do we activate that data in real time from your cookie consent banner, where you're anonymously tracking, or maybe known tracker is tied to my account, and that can feed directly into my personalization engine, so it's changing the customer journey on the web page. The technology exists. We're talking about far phenomenal, crazy pieces of AI at the moment in a lot of these things, but we don't have this foundational basic experience of navigating a website. How do we link those two things together? Very easy. With the consent management profile, it becomes very simple. Remove the technology specifics away from that and have this kind of generic program. It allows you to be flexible, right? You do have these big one massive platform which do everything. If you've got that, good for you, that's great. Most companies, we have to acquire things bit by bit. We've got a new piece of automation, let's activate that in real time. There's a new piece of organization with a new vendor. Let's link those two things together based on those customer choices. So as we go through, we understand that customer better. From the CMP, which is the device-based consent, which is maybe just an ID, to a known but unauthenticated user, maybe they're just an email address, maybe they're just a phone number, to a well-known returning customer who's navigating across different websites, you know what their consents are, and you can actually give them the unique experience that they want. So that's consent management. Key takeaways, and kind of some next steps that we can do around enforcing that data use. It is, what are the obligations from a compliance perspective? A lot of people are still in things, why can't I just have the flag, the yes or no? There is actually some legitimate legal requirements around that, so we have to enforce, right? That's that first step. Once you've kind of got through the door, if you're going back to your teams, and once the DPO says we do need something, it becomes a very easy conversation. Then go, what is our consent strategy? Where are we going to get to? How do we get those, not just a yes or no compliance piece, but it's an efficiency and it's a growth, and this is a competitive edge that we're going to have. And then finally, what's the long-term goal? How are we going to be starting to pull that data in securely, but what data do we want? Let's go back to that golden age of advertising Mad Men style, but from this new modern data perspective. Before, we felt like there was free data everywhere across the internet. You can just capture those third-party tools, but really, we're not that anymore. It does take a bit more intuition. It does take a bit more statistical analysis of our customers. And we can't get that data freely. We need the data ourselves, so we ask the questions. We do the A/B testing. We do, what data do we want and how do we deliver that value to our customers? Very exciting time to be able to do that, right? How do we process that? What data do we want to feed into our giant LLMs that are going to create these really cool, unique experiences for users? So that's kind of that future state, and it's all built upon data, and data hand in hand with the customers. So that's kind of what OneTrust does. This is kind of a nice little overview, roughly, of the platform. So we've got all the different collection points, how we can centralize that consent and enforce it downstream. Feel free to come and have a chat with us around that, all the specifics of it. But for now, any questions? I do want to open up to the floor if anyone had any questions.